Place and the Meraki Institute of Learning proudly present Together We Rise, a series on capturing the journeys of resilience and well-being based on the Rise, Wellness, and Resilience framework. For those of you who are joining us today for the first time, this show is a series digging deep into the concept of resilience. In this interview series, we are talking to those in the corridor who have exhibited courage and strength in the face of hardship. These individuals are here with us to share their personal story of resilience. We hope this series will inspire hope and possibility in others. Because when we call on our courage and show up in the midst of struggle, we offer a bright place and to not give up. Together we can rise with the means to manage, restore, and grow. Welcome, Stacey. Thank you so much for being here with us today. Stacey, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, thank you, Tanya, for doing this series and for having me. So I was born and raised here in Cedar Rapids on the southeast side of town. I was born to a single teenage mother, and we lived in between the Oak Hill Jackson neighborhood and the Wellington Heights neighborhood in government subsidized housing. And I had what I believed was a pretty good childhood. I had a loving mother. The father was not in the picture, but my grandmother was around, and I had cousins and aunts around, so I had about as good of an upbringing that you can get being born and raised in this community without any money. My mother was killed when I was 4 years old, and my sister and I went to live with our grandmother, who was also a single parent, had raised 7 kids of her own, and now was raising 2 grandkids in the Oak Hill Jackson neighborhood and the apartment complex there, and found a way to make it work. So I was educated here, Grantwood Elementary to McKinley to Washington High School, and went off to college after that.
Stacey, you know what? You and I had talked about this initiative and this project as so much of what we wanted to do was pull out the stories of those in the corridor who have experienced struggle and adversity, yet arrived to this place and this man sitting in front of me today, which I would describe as resilient and cultivating wellness and kindness and compassion and influence in the world. Now, one of the things that we try to tease apart is what are key things that led to that resilience? And so when you think about some of the struggle you had faced, what are some things that stand out to you that you believe influenced who you are today?
So I've been fortunate enough to work with people here in the community trying to mitigate the impacts of adverse childhood experiences. And one of the things we found in this work, and others have found in this work, is that one of the best protective factors is having a loving adult who is in your life consistently. And I have seen a lot of traumas and have experienced a lot of trauma growing up. But the one thing that was consistent with me, whether it was with my mother, who was alive the first 4 years of my life, or my grandmother, they poured a lot of love into us. I've often said before, I was acutely aware that we were poor and didn't have much, but I never felt that way. And I think that speaks to the power of love in a person's life. So I can say without a doubt and confidently that Shirley Martin, who was my grandmother, is the reason I'm here today. I would not be the man that I am had it not been for a woman from the American South, old Southern Baptist, pouring her love.
Yeah. You know, Stacey, I'd heard you talk about other relationships you had throughout your journey and childhood, adolescence, and core mentors. Tell me a little bit about those people and what that meant for you throughout your journey.
You know, I've been blessed. I've had a great life with respect to meeting folks who have poured into me. As you mentioned, my mentors, I believe you may be speaking with Lori Ampey, who worked at the Boys and Girls Club for many years in our community, who saw something in me. My coaches in high school saw something in me, and I've been really lucky to have mentors in the professional space. Opara is one of them, that have seen something in me. Now, with all of that said, I do believe that there's something in everybody. There's a light in everybody, and I think it's our job as people who care about others is to fan the flame a little bit. And at our core, what we as human beings really want is to be seen, to be acknowledged, and to feel as if we actually do have a place in this world. And so from all of the folks who came in contact with me and decided they wanted to stay in contact with me and pour into me in the way that my grandmother did, deacons at my church, coaches, teachers. Oh man, I've had some good teachers throughout life. All that adds up. And another phenomenon that I became aware of, when did I realize I was doing this? Probably around college, is I would attach myself to people I respected. And I would mimic the behaviors that I thought were positive, that I thought made them cool and successful. So I had a lot of folks that I was trying to pull from, and I think part of that plays into the fact that I didn't have a father in my life. So I was looking for what I thought were appropriate character traits in other men in my life to try to compile that example that I didn't have.
Yeah. When we think about the RISE framework, the core element of R is relationships. And one thing that you just said that just resonates so deep with me is that they knew the greatness that lived inside you. Tell me a little bit about what that meant for you to then show up and believe in yourself and cultivate your own growth.
There is great power in believing in yourself. There's great power in having that confidence. And that's a forever thing. I had people in my life who made me believe that I was capable of doing great things. The lesson for me is I am not necessarily special. It's that if we could have a society where people, one, accepted the fact that there is something great that lives in all of us, so we can acknowledge and accept that, and two, as I mentioned earlier, it's incumbent upon all of us to fan that flame, to let young people know that they are seen and that they matter, to let older folks know. I mean, this is still important in my life, to have these reminders. Life, as we know, is tough and it can beat you down, but to have those folks who can build you up, who can remind you that there's something great inside of you is powerful.
The I in the RISE, we have an element in there called efficacy. And that to cultivate our resilience, there has to be this conviction and this belief of efficacy, a sense of mastery, that I have strengths and assets and they're needed in this world. I know someone you went to high school with and elementary school with, and I was telling her that I had done the pre-interview with you and just what a sweet soul you are. And she said, one of the things that sticks out to me so much about Stacey is he would show up to school in these three-piece suits. And he would tell you, he was going to be the president of the United States. He showed up to spaces and said, my voice matters. In a society which often tries to shove down people who look like you, Stacey, what advice could you give to other young children who also need to be told, your voice matters, you matter, show up in spaces with a three-piece suit and demand that arena?
You got to have pretty thick skin to show up to elementary school in a suit and tie with a woman's name and bright blonde hair and green eyes. I had quite a time growing up, but that gets back to the confidence I had. And I had it because others built me up. People remember you when you are unique, right? We live in a world that is constantly trying to make us the same and to be like the others and to fit into social constructs that really don't matter. When you dare to be different, you stand out and you do make space for yourself, and you determine that you are going to be a force to be reckoned with. And I think some of that may be some trauma that's hung over for me wearing suits to school, but it really, I think, was indicative of that sense of confidence that I think is important to have if we are going to get on and be successful in this life. The other thing I would say, and this has to do with taking up space, particularly in communities that aren't used to seeing people like me do so, that's a worthy reminder for people of color, for marginalized communities, underrepresented communities, women in the workforce. Our everyday existence, unfortunately, can be viewed as a threat, or at the very least, make people uncomfortable. And it's not fair to us because I wake up and I'm a black man, right? It's not a choice that I have to be black. It's not a choice that people have to be born queer. It's not a choice that people have to choose their sex or gender at birth, right? So you were born the way that you are, and you have to navigate life the way that you are. And we ought to live in a society that's capable of respecting who it is that you are. But that's just not the case. We're not quite there yet. So it is important for people to be able to walk in power in whatever space they encounter, knowing that their very existence can alter the space that they're in. Brent Staples wrote a wonderful essay about this called Black Men in Public Spaces, where he talks about how his very nature of being a black person literally alters public space. It makes people cross the street when they're, walking by him. And doesn't matter, you can't wear your credentials, right? You can't say, but hey, wait, I'm an elected official or I'm a police officer. What people see is who you are. Those other accoutrements that we acquire don't really matter. So because that is the reality of the world, it's really important to be strong in the space that you walk in.
I love that so much, and there's something you said that I just want to tease out a little bit, and that's define the social constructs that really at the end of the day have no meaning behind who we are as humans and a humankind. Sure. What would you say to those who are struggling with that, who are different than what society terms as the norms of who we should show up in the world as? Because our resilience needs cultivated the most in those times and those spaces to dare to be different in a world that casts a lot of judgment.
It's helpful to remember that social constructs are just that. They are paradigms that somebody's made up, and they have been made up to serve the interests of somebody. Probably not you, but they exist to serve an interest. That people have ideas of what it's supposed to be for me to be a black man, how I'm supposed to sound, the kind of career I'm supposed to be involved in, whether or not I have been involved in crime or whatever. People have these ideas, stereotypes we can call them. I think another thing though too is to do that exercise where you ask yourself, are you being true to yourself? Is it worth betraying who you are to fit into a box that somebody else has created? I think it's a heck of a lot cooler to fit into the box that you create for yourself and to try to find success and meaning in life in a way that feels authentic and genuine to yourself. It ain't the easiest thing to do, but I do believe in the law of attraction that the more confident and comfortable you feel in your own skin with who you are, and knowing that you're beautiful and you're sexy and you're cool and you're smart and you're all the things, real recognizes real. You start to attract genuine people in your life. So at the end of the day, if you keep it up, the people who are trying to develop social constructs, who are trying to fit people in boxes, end up getting self-selected out of your life. And that's a beautiful thing.
Yes, it is.
The thing that you talk about is what I would say is how we go through this journey of cultivating our emotional intelligence, or in the RISE framework where we talk about our social emotional development. Because when we have a deeper awareness of who we are and authentically showing up in spaces, and we can perspective take and we can look around at relational rhythms and see these patterns and what's about me, what's not about me. What are ways, is what I would describe an entirely very deeply emotionally intelligent man. How did you cultivate that in yourself?
I think we're born with varying levels of social emotional intelligence, and I think people develop it to different degrees over time. It's a muscle I think you can learn to flex and exercise. As a person of color growing up in a predominantly white space, you get used to being the other. You get used to observing a lot. It's a matter of survival. I have to know how people perceive me. And particularly being a black man, you have to know that lots of folks perceive blackness, or at least associate blackness with danger, with threats, with fear. And so you start this dual processing system in your head. W.E.B. Du Bois wrote about this. He called it double consciousness. You have to be aware of the world, but also be aware of how the world perceives you. So I've had an advantage in developing social emotional awareness, I would say, because I had to be. I had to pick up on these social cues. I had to understand perceptions that existed between classes of people, race notwithstanding. But you also have to try to understand perspectives that are developed between races as well. So when you are a minority growing up in a predominantly white space, it is a matter of survival to flex this muscle. I have not met a person more empathetic than who my grandmother was, meaning that she lived on a fixed income for most of her life, Social Security income. We lived in the Oak Hill Jackson apartments. I don't ever remember a time where someone asked my grandmother for money or a place to stay or a meal where she turned them down. Wow. Always had the ability to care for other people. And that stuck with me. The purpose of my career is to help people, despite what the naysayers say. I grew up keenly aware of every human being's value, intrinsic value. And I think when you operate with a deep sense of empathy, when that is a major tenet throughout your life, you start to really flex that social emotional awareness muscle that lives in our heart.
I appreciate you so much talking about this concept of empathy and how it plays such a core piece into how we develop our emotional intelligence and the compassion and the kindness that we show others around us. One of the things that it makes me think about is this concept of meaning and purpose, and this empathy for what you have gone through throughout your own life, but also for what others have to go through. And not saying, every hard thing happens for a reason, but out of those experiences, how do we make the world a better place? How do I give back to the world in a place that can leave it a little bit better than how I experienced it? That seems to be such a core piece of your life work. Tell me about that and where that came from for you.
I have no choice, because I know that I live in a community where poverty rates are highest among people of color. I know that I live in a community where we have elected leaders, people who are charged with leading this community, who aren't well-versed in implicit bias, who don't know what it means to be an anti-racist, who don't understand the struggles and challenges of people who don't look like them. And I have that knowledge in my head, right? I know the world isn't a great place for everybody. And I know that we can change that. We have the tools and the resources. It's a matter of will. And so I don't have a choice. I am a person that couldn't live with myself unless I knew I was doing what I could to make a difference. And I know that there are a lot of other folks out there like me. it is my hope, I guess, that more people in our community, particularly people of means, particularly people of high privilege, it is my hope that they just take a little more time to recognize what it is they have and what it is they can do.
You speak of a word that I think is an element of resilience that I think has probably played a piece of your ongoing work, and that's hope, and how we hold on to hope and how we have hope but also have a vision and keep moving forward. How do you hold on to that hope? What would you say to others who feel like it's very difficult to wake up with that hope?
It is difficult, and that's okay. Things will be hard in life. But hope is essential. Hope is spiritual. And hope, I think, is the foundation, really, of resilience. You have to believe that one day, somehow, things are going to get better. If you can't see that, if you can't see the other side, I think it's extraordinarily difficult to get to it. People of color, that's all we had. It was up from slavery, and we had to hope that one day we would be free. We had to hope that when we were runaway slaves navigating the Underground Railroad, that we would make it to the North. When we were dealing with Reconstruction, segregation, the Jim Crow South, we had to hope that the freedom rides were going to pan out. We had to hope that the sit-ins, that the marches were going to deliver civil rights, and so on and so forth. The struggle continues. So hope is foundational to collective action. It's foundational to resilience. It's foundational to progress, foundational to change. And it is sometimes hard to have. I struggle with it. I struggle with my hope for what this community ought to be on a daily basis. And some days are harder than others. But there are flashes, there are moments where I'm like, we are on to something here. And without that, I don't know if I could keep going. So you do sometimes have to search for it. But hope is a belief. You have to own the belief. It has to be a part of who you are, because that's what's going to drive you, is this idea that we're going to get to a better place.
Stacey, you have been open and honest about, in the midst of this work, it's not easy work. It takes incredible courage. It takes bravery. It takes vulnerability. It also takes an acknowledgement that you have to take care of yourself. And whether that's therapy or mind-to-body work or yoga, or tell me how you take care of your heart and your soul.
With yoga, with mind-body work, with therapy. I want to be very open about that. Therapy has saved my life, and I encourage everyone to seek therapy. What I am encouraged by is there seems, at least with respect to this community, Cedar Rapids, Linn County, there seems to be an emerging element, if you will, comprised mostly of young people, but of all ages. There's this element in the community that they are reading How to Be an Anti-Racist. They are reading 1619 Project. They are watching Ava DuVernay documentaries. They are coming to the halls of power and politics with a knowledge that not many elected and community leaders have. That's important, and that hasn't always been the case. I'm encouraged by that, and so when I am having a crisis of hope, crisis of faith, I try to remember those young people.
When you think about your journey and sitting here today, what is something that resonates most with you, as a reflection?
When I first went to college, I started out at Drake University, and I had a professor in the School of Business, Professor Blum, I believe was his name, and he wanted us, we did this exercise where we wrote about what our life would look like a certain time after college. And I was just sure I was going to be a United States Senator. I was just positive I was going to be a senator, beautiful place in DC, wife, kids, and the whole 9 yards.
The American
The
dream.
American dream for a young, aspiring politician. I am not a United States Senator, but I am living a life that I don't even know that I could have imagined, certainly when I was a young kid or when I was in college. It's something that I think I could dream up in my wildest of dreams, but the idea of being a person of color in a predominantly white space that could have some influence on what happens in the community, that could be in a policy-making role, that could, you know, are we raising taxes and what are we doing with the revenue, that had the means to see the world, that could cultivate the kinds of deep friendships that I have. What that stands out to me in my journey, and it is both a reminder and a harbinger of things to come, a reminder of where I've been, and a lesson in sort of the awesome power of hope, of resiliency, of believing that things can change and get better. And to sort of put a bow on all of this, when I was in my darkest hour, suffering from catastrophic depression, I had a person say to me that your future self is going to be so thankful that you didn't give up in this moment when it's really, really dark. And I hold on to that. I hold on to that when I'm losing policy battles or I'm getting beat up in the press and the media. I hold on to that to know that I'm here for a reason, and my future self is going to be so thankful that I didn't throw in the towel because it got tough.
We talk so much about that in this resilience field, is, you know, whether you want to talk about perseverance or what we talk about, this sense of encouragement, that it's not about the end result. It's not about, you know, at the end of time, did you reach exactly what you wanted to reach, but what was the journey to get there, and what are the moments that you can be proud of along the way? Because it's the very essence of not giving up through those hard times that offer us sometimes the greatest beauty in the end. Stacey, thank you so much for doing this interview, for being here with us today. Your voice matters, your story matters, and I have no doubt that it will provide great inspiration to many.
Thank you so much for having me.
Support is out there.
You're okay, just how you are.
The staff members and the people that I met along the way just made me realize that there are genuine people out there that actually just want to help.
We'll get better. No matter how bad it is, it won't get perfect, it won't go away, but it will get better.
How do you become your best self for others if you're not doing that for yourself first?
No matter the challenges you and your family face, Tanager Place is here for you. We'll meet you wherever you are in your journey, and together define a path to reach your goals. Together we rise. Tanager Place.
Thank you again for joining us today and for spending time with us. We hope today's segment offered hope and healing. Today's series brought to you by Tanager Place and the Meraki Institute of Learning. For more information, please visit our website